Guitar Co-op Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon. Peter Zaphé, the Norwegian philosopher, wrote a now famous essay, The Last Messiah, which discusses the evolution of consciousness and the problem it creates for humankind. We have intellectual surplus. In addition to the awareness of death, it creates spiritual desires and demands that reality cannot fulfill. For him, this is the tragic destiny of the species, to become incapable to survive for having evolved beyond what is necessary. He compares us to the Irish elk of the Pleistocene, whose antlers, over 3.5 meters long, would have created such unbearable weight and such lack of mobility that it led to its extinction. Even though this was not quite the case of its extinction, the analogy is good and also applies to different aspects of the 18th century life. That is Scott Tennant playing La Musette by Robert de Visée, a guitar co-op release that you can hear in the playlist that accompanies this episode. First of all, the analogy illustrates the existence of an instrument called the theorbo. This is Jacob Lindberg playing Chaconne in A minor by Robert de Visée. One of the most complicated subjects in the history of music is the transformation of plucked string instruments. Around the turn of the 1600s, the lute was a favorite instrument. Teardrop shape with 7 or 8 courses, that is, pairs of strings with similar tuning or tuned in octaves. That tuning system was quite similar to that of the modern guitar, incidentally. Its heyday occurred during the reign of Louis XIII. This is Dave Bergmüller playing Carillon by Gaultier on a lute. From 1630 onwards, the lute declined and became practically forgotten. The guitar also fell out of favor at that time, but from the 1650s onwards, it returned to the scene as it was a preferred instrument of Louis XIV. This guitar, which today we call the Baroque guitar, began with 4 courses and later adopted 5. This 5 double-string format dominated the 17th century until the first decades of the 18th century. It is also very similar to the Brazilian wide-string guitar since it was brought to the Americas by the conquistadores. That is David Jacques playing Robert de Visée's Menuet from Suite Number 9, which you can hear in the playlist that accompanies this episode that we have carefully prepared for you. You can get the link in the description to this episode. However, it did not meet a fundamental demand, the establishment of the Baroque aesthetic. In music, what defines the Baroque period is a technique called basso continuo. William Christie directing Allons, allons, accourez tous from Lully's Atis. Basso continuo is a way of creating music in which controlled improvisation is incorporated into a pre-written melodic and harmonic skeleton. The composer writes the melody and bass lines, as well as the intermediate parts, but not the full harmonic accompaniment. The musician who plays the basso continuo reads from the bass line and improvises the harmony according to their skill. That creates a rich internal tapestry of music in which the texture is filled with improvisation. The instruments most often used for basso continuo are the harpsichord, the organ, the harp, and the lute.
Ne parlez pas toujours de la guerre cruelle, parlez des plaisirs et des jeux. Les muses et les arts vont signaler leur zèle, je vais favoriser leurs vœux. Nous préparons une fête nouvelle pour le héros qui les amène dans cet asile heureux. Ne parlez pas toujours de la guerre cruelle, parlez des plaisirs et des jeux.
This is Christophe Rousset directing Ne parlez pas toujours from Lully's Isis. Opera, that is, musical theater, is the quintessential Baroque genre. Born in Italy, it spread to most European courts, usually sung in Italian, and it was imported by the absolutist France. It took on a different aspect there. 17th century French opera is sung in French. The style is more rhetorical and almost always falls into two genres, tragedy or opera ballet, since French monarchs love to dance. The Poème Harmonique, directed by Vincent Dumestre, is playing Lully's Ballet des Nations from Les Bourgeois Gentilhommes. You can hear the full track in our playlist that accompanies this episode. The simple lute was not appropriate for this new style. In Italy, luthiers started to experiment with new shapes and added more bass strings to the lute to further enhance its ability to play basso continuo. This instrument was called chitarrone or theorbo. This is Jacob Lindbergh playing a prelude in A minor by Robert de Visée on the theorbo. The theorbo treble strings pitch was also raised, and as the high strings could no longer handle the extreme tension, they began to be tuned an octave lower. This created what you call a re-entrant tuning, in which the high strings are in the middle of the instrument, surrounded by the low strings. At the same time, it was necessary to create an extension for the instrument's neck to accommodate strings longer than 1.5 meters, several of them sometimes reaching 13 or even 14 courses. The lute became a kind of Irish elk of instruments. This was one of the instruments adopted by our composer of the month, the greatest French composer of guitar and theorbo, Robert de Visée. This is Rolf Lillewand playing La Mascarade by Robert de Visée. Visé's career coincides with the apogee of the theorbo and the Baroque guitar, and he's the only composer who wrote music for all three instruments, lute, guitar, and theorbo. Suffocated by the weight of its horns, the theorbo naturally died out soon after. It was very difficult to tune because it required the theorbo player to stand up to reach the tuning pegs. Once tuned, it was forced to play a sequence of pieces in the same key, since the tuning system caused other keys to sound out of tune. A pause was needed for retuning the instrument for the next sequence. This led to the adoption, out of sheer necessity, of a new musical form, eminently Baroque, called the suite, that is, a sequence with all the pieces in the same key. Jacob Lindbergh playing a chaconne by Robert de Visée. Very little is known of Robert de Visée's life outside the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, the greatest absolutist monarch in history. It is possible that his family came from Viseu in Portugal, or from Visée in Wallonia, now part of Belgium, but he was baptized in 1652 in La Flèche, France. His father, also named Robert, was a viol player. He lost his parents at the age of 10. He appeared as an adult in Paris, marrying Catherine Sarvan at the age of 21. It is assumed that he studied with the great Italian-French guitarist Francesco Corbetta, having dedicated a tombeau, a kind of musical epitaph, to him. But the fact is that he also composed tombeaus for Gaillot, Mouton, and Dubuc, and may have studied with any of them. It is interesting to learn about these great composers of the French Baroque for the guitar and theorbo. This is Pierre Pitzl playing Corbetta's Allemande in C major. Corbetta, or François Corbet, or Francis Corbett, as he was known in France and the UK, was born in Italy in 1615 and was a pioneer along Foscarini of a style that combined a strumming or rasgueado style with passages played with the fingertips. He was proud of never having played the lute and being a master exclusively of the guitar. With it, he achieved success both in England and in France, where he played in Lully's ballets. Corbetta supplemented his income with the gambling industry in England, with the permission of his patron, the King Charles II. His style is deep and bold, as shown in the piece that we have just heard. This is Alex McCartney playing a prelude in B flat by Messenger. Messenger was a pioneer of the lute in the 1620s and 30s. He was one of the first composers to adopt the D minor tuning that is characteristic of the Baroque lute. He's also considered one of the creators of the style brisé, or the harp-like style, in which a beautiful sequence of chords is played with an expressive spreading of notes. He was a teacher of Edmond Gaultier. This is Francesca Torelli playing Edmond Gaultier's Le Tombeau de Messenger. Edmond Gaultier, or Gaultier the Elder, worked as a valet at the court of the Queen Marie de' Medici and as a court lutenist. It seems that he was the first to compose tombeaus, that is, musical epitaphs in the sort of a very solemn dance, like the Tombeau de Messenger we just heard. He was a cousin of another Gaultier, Denis. That is Lutz Kirchhoff playing La Coquette Virtuose by Denis Gaultier. Denis, or Gaultier the Younger, has his works often confused with those of his cousin, and it seems that he earned his living as a freelance lutenist. He was a master of melody and dance grace. His music was published in 3 books, one of them called The Rhetoric of the Gods. This is Hopkinson Smith playing La Gavotte by Mouton. Charles Mouton belongs to the generation that Visée must have known in person and was, along with Gaillot, the last great lute composer, with 2 published books. This is Anthony Bale's playing Le Plan de Psyché by Gaillot. You can hear all this piece is complete in the playlist that accompanies this episode. The elder Gaillot may have been Visé's teacher and also published music for the oud lute. Together, these composers create a huge void of knowledge because, having not worked at court, they left no trace other than baptismal certificates and published music books. Publishing, at least, was an indication of relevance. This is Javier Diaz-Latorre playing a jig by Robert de Visée. Anyhow, around 1680, Robert de Visée was hired as a chamber musician for King Louis XIV. In 1709, he was appointed a singer at the royal chamber, probably in order to receive a salary. And in 1719, he formalized his decades-long activity as a maître guitare du roi, master of guitar for the king, not only for Louis XIV, but also for his successor, Louis XV, his great-grandson, who was 10 years old at the time. This may have assured some kind of income in old age. Visée died in 1730 during the reign of Louis XV. Javier Diaz-Latorre playing a Passacaille in B minor by Robert de Visée. Here we must talk of the other elk of the Pleistocene, the institution that would succumb under the weight of its own power, complexity, and splendor, the French monarchy. This is Lully's Te Deum, played by Musica Antiqua Köln, directed by Reinbert Goebbels. Louis the Great, the Sun King, is notable not only for being Robert de Visé's patron, but for being the most powerful monarch in all of European history, and the longest reigning as well, 72 years and 110 days, from 1643 to 1715. Louis XIV emblematized the era of absolutism based on divine right. He was bellicose. He expanded France's colonial tentacles, waged long wars against Spain and Holland, eliminated feudal remnants from the French countryside by summoning the nobility to live in Versailles, promoted the conclusion of the Thirty Years' War, and made Catholicism the official religion, prohibiting Protestant minorities such as the Huguenots, who were forced to convert or to immigrate. He left Louis XV a powerful country, but one financially weakened by so many wars. This is the overture to the triumph of love. Louis XIV controlled the taste for the fine arts and architecture in France with the transformation of the Palace of Versailles. His reign marks the apogee of the French Baroque style in architecture, in the fine arts, in drama, and music. Among the artists associated to Louis XIV are Molière, Racine, Boileau, the painter Lebrun, and the composer Lully. Christophe Rousset directing Les Talents Lyriques in a chaconne from Lully's Phaeton. Robert de Visée worked in a France still dominated by Lully's fame and power. Lully, or Giovanni Battista Lully, started his life as a street performer in Florence. He was then taken to Paris at the age of 14 so that the daughter of a nobleman could practice her Italian. There, he showed immense talent for music and became more French than the French themselves. His vocal and dance music gradually made him indispensable at court. From 1661, he became Royal Superintendent of Music and then Music Master of the royal family. La Chapelle Royale, playing the entrée to the Armide by Lully. Lully's comedy ballets, written in collaboration with Molière at first, were immensely successful at court. French music up to that point was essentially dramatic. As Louis XIV was a dancer, and a good one, he demanded that lively and elegant dances be included in the performances. He frequently danced in these productions himself. This made those dances to be included in suites, such as gavottes, minuets, rigodons, sarabandes, and chaconnes. This is a ballet by Lully. Lully organized court musical life, including the size and personnel of the orchestras. The Grand Orchestra, which played opera and ballet, had dozens of violins and violas, and several theorbos and harpsichords. He produced one opera ballet a year and safeguarded his monopoly, becoming director of the Royal Academy of Music in France. This is Toyohiko Sato playing Robert de Visée's transcription of Lully's Ouverture de la Cour de Versailles. Later on, Lully had problems with the king, who was very uncomfortable with his dissolute life and his escapades with the homosexual circles of the court. Even then, the vivacity and solemnity of his music produced a revolution in style. He introduced, amongst other innovations, the French overture, which would be adopted throughout Europe, including Bach and Handel. Lully created the King's Chamber, a private ensemble that brought together la crème de la crème of musicians at court. Visée took part in this group, even after Lully's death, alongside Fourquet in the viola da gamba and Couperin in the harpsichord. It was simply not possible to write music in France that did not conform to Lully's precepts. Each composer was judged by their degree of similarity to him, and Visée makes this clear in his publications. Toyohiko Sato is playing a lute transcription of Les Sourdins d'Armite by Lully. Lully had a bizarre death. During the performance of his Te Deum celebrating the king's convalescence, he struck his own foot with a baton he used to conduct the orchestra. The wound became gangrenous, and he died of a generalized infection. Lully's De Profundis is played here by Les Épopées, directed by Stéphane Fugé. You can hear all this beautiful music complete in our playlist that you can access through the link you can find in the description of this episode. How far can the antlers of a prehistoric elk reach? How deep can the hill with which a king treads on the heads of mortals reach? To what extent can he use his power to have a life of indescribable luxury that contrasts with the hard and prosaic life of his subjects? Having hundreds of artists and artisans decorating a multitude of palaces, playwrights, servants of all kinds, an army to obey him, and hundreds of musicians employed for opera and ballet productions for the nobility was not enough for Louis XIV. Robert de Visé's work consisted, in addition to taking part in the great productions with his theorbo, of playing in the king's private chambers. When the king was sleepless or wanted to dine alone, he would summon Visée to play. When he took his daily walks through the gardens of Versailles, Visée would accompany him 2 steps behind, playing his guitar, as if he were a kind of human playlist or iPod, creating a soundtrack for this artistic taste in which artifice was considered the highest value. Javier Diaz-Latorre playing Abu Haï by Robert de Visée. Robert de Visé's guitar and theorbo embody Baroque eloquence. Their rhythms imitate the speech rhythm in French. The pronunciation mimics the artificial style of dramatic declamation. His profusion of ornaments reminds us that artifice is always inversely proportional to the material conditions of life. He seeks to nurture ornamentation, emphasizing what is less important. Visée seems to compose to fill in the intimate palatial space with the most elegant ornamental profusion, with that which is unexpected and witty, or else with a gentle melancholy. This is Javier Diaz-Latorre playing an Allemande by Robert de Visée. Visée also seems to have been a humble man, saying that, knowing myself too well to be able to distinguish myself by the strength of my composition, I have done my best to conform to the taste of men of skill. That man of skill obviously was Lully. Visée published 2 books of pieces for the Baroque guitar in 1682 and 1686, with 12 suites and as many individual pieces and transcriptions. Despite the difficulty of making an acceptable version for the modern guitar, these are the works that raise his name in the 20th century, beginning with the editions of Emilio Pujol in the 1920s, which were recorded by Andrés Segovia. This is Andrés Segovia playing a saraband from Robert de Visé's Suite in D minor. In 1716, Visée also published a collection of pieces for the theorbo, containing several masterpieces, among them the transcriptions of music by Lully, Couperin, and Forqueray. This is Scott Tennant playing Les Sylvains by Couperin in transcription by Robert de Visée, adapted for the modern guitar by Scott himself. We are very proud at GuitarCoop to having released Scott Tennant's CD Barricade Mystérieuse, which includes these pieces. Visée had another distinguished student, Jean-Étienne Vaudry de Cézenet, who mentions Visée as a teacher in a manuscript album preserved in the City Library of Besançon. Much of Visé's best music is preserved in this album, and in another that is in the National Library of France in Paris, which contains more than 70 pieces. This is Rolf Lillevan playing a Mascarade by Robert de Visée, which is included in Vaudry de Cézenet's album. The dark quality of the theorbo inspired Visée to write some of his most heartfelt works. He did not only write epitaphs for his masters and predecessors. He seems to have suffered the premature loss of two daughters and shares with us his profound sadness in this La Plainte, Tombeau de Demoiselle de Visée, Fille de l'Auteur. It's a somber testament to the fragility of life. This is Jacob Lindberg playing the theorbo with the Tombeau de Demoiselles de Visée, the daughters of Robert. It is very complicated to translate the special resonance color and texture of these instruments to the modern guitar. At no other period in music, instruments have been so integrated into the ambience where they were played. Pujol's initial efforts served to generate interest in the music and to produce, decades later, more faithful contemporary editions such as the one made by Stridix. In my opinion, a turning point in the way these Visée works were treated with the modern guitar came with Manuel Barrueco, who managed to create the illusion of a re-entrant tuning and the naturalness of the ornamentation. Manuel Barrueco playing Passacaglia in B minor by Robert de Visée. GuitarCoop is very pleased to maintain in its catalog the brilliant recordings by Scott Tennant, which takes another step forward in this process. This is Scott Tennant playing Lully's Ouverture de la Cour de Versailles, arranged by Robert de Visée for the Baroque guitar, and then arranged by Scott Tennant for the modern guitar. Visé's death also marks the final decline of the Lutheran guitar solo tradition in France, with François Campion as its last representative. The theorbo still had a brief revival as a basso continuo instrument. This music had to wait for another 250 years to be heard again in historically appropriate instruments. Today, we have great representatives such as Vincent Dumestre, Xavier Diaz-Latorre, Rolf Lillevan, Jacob Limburg, Hopkinson Smith, and Toyohiko Sato. I hope that you have enjoyed the music in this episode, and I want to thank Henrique Caldas for the technical works and Monicky Zaczéski for the general management of the series. Hope to see you next month with Ferdinando Carulli. Goodbye. GuitarCoop Podcasts. Great composers. Conceived and presented by Fabio Zanon.